Hi everyone, welcome to Babbling. You may notice we have a special guest with us today. We have Jack, who is obviously another aficionado when it comes to tactics and all things West Ham. So he's going to be joining us today to talk about the Gent game. And also, Jack, if you just want to do a little intro on yourself as well for those that don't know you, and then we'll get into the actual preview, sorry, of Gent game.
No, cheers, Mike. I think you smashed it, really. I'll take aficionado. All I do is very similar, really. Tactical review work. I don't get to do a lot of preview work because I'm pretty swamped after every game watching it back. So mostly what I focus on is performance review for about a day and a half after each game, breaking into every individual performance, watching full match, then the individual players. I've got an article that goes up every week on that on my site, which is analyticsunited.co.uk. And then after that, we do pod content where we go more into the sort of the tactics and the tactical battle between the two managers, and then how player performance fed into that. So, and Cal Goodall, WHU Analytics is on there as well. He does a data breakdown every week. So, yeah, very, very, very similar stuff.
Great. Yeah, cheers for the intro. And guys, please do follow Jack. Please do follow their content. You know, any good content, especially any content that goes into the more of the dynamics and the mechanics of football is always good. The more we know, the better informed we are, and that's always a good thing when it comes to football. So, guys, strap in. We're going to go through the review. Just going to do a brief little intro video, and then we'll get cracking right into it. So, yeah, stay tuned, guys. So, Jack, the last game was a 1-1 draw. It wasn't a spectacle in any way, shape, or form. I think we can all agree on that one. Many things to improve, such as having a left-hand side would be amazing to see. We only pretty much was a one-sided team the entire game. But before we kind of get into how we can improve, maybe how we want us to set up, maybe our views on who should play, what was your kind of overriding feeling of that first game? Was it more relief that we got through with a point, or was it felt like a missed opportunity?
I don't think either. I don't think, to me, it felt like a missed opportunity in the end. I think a draw is a good result. They're a good side, and taking a draw from the first leg makes the second leg relatively simple for us. And I was relieved at the end by when we got the draw, because of how poor we were, particularly in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the game. But my overriding sense afterwards was frustration that we'd gone there. And I don't know whether I'd call it arrogance. It seems maybe a little bit harsh to call it that, but there have been a few games in Europe over the last 2 years where I felt like we have thought, because of the quality of player we have, we can simply just go with a two in the middle, press with the front three, leave the back line dropped off because we're worried about the pace, and just not, and think that Declan Rice can do hero ball in the midfield by himself. And I just think that's unfair and really harsh. And we've seen that not work on several occasions. And even when we have, tried to approach it differently, but been concerned about pacing behind and wanted to play a back five, when you're looking at kind of the adaptive back five we used in the Frankfurt games, that didn't work either. And we still, I feel, haven't really worked out how to deal with teams that are very direct from a back three system and use a sort of floating forward in the Daichi Kamada, Hyun-Suk Hong role, because we just don't have a player that can go with them. We don't have a player that's happy stepping out of the back line to track that player. And we're overwhelmed in the middle, who are trying to press to support the front line because, again, for some reason, we think we can press with a front three when we're leaving the back line 10 yards inside our own half, or 5 yards inside our own half. So that player seems to constantly get free, and it means it's quite easy to either find that player through build up, or to go direct and then go back into that player who can then pick incisive passes that make it difficult for the back line. I do feel sorry for sometimes for the defenders in these situations. We saw Johnson have a really bad game in the first leg of this game, or Cresswell have really bad games in this system last season. I just think sometimes the lateral centre-backs, who typically, because of injuries, we're often choosing fullbacks out of position in lateral centre-back positions, get super exposed in a really difficult job.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Obviously, we tried to use, in a way, we tried to use both Bowen and and Lanzini in that kind of role, and it just neither of them seemed to really quite understand how they were playing. Obviously, Ings was, you can say, isolated. You can say relatively ineffective in terms of pressing from the front. The way we had the ball again, we weren't that great. Downs didn't necessarily have the game that he's had in other games for us. Again, Rice was just having to be here, there, and everywhere, and at times nowhere at all because of just how porous it was. And as you say, that what Gent did do very well is they played the long ball. Or not necessarily just a long ball, but they were quite direct in their passing, and they were playing for the seconds and thirds. And we were just constantly just too many gaps throughout us to kind of manage it, and certainly something we have to improve. And one of the things that was really disappointing was the lack of intent, direction, or however you want to call it, but just lack of purpose down that left-hand side was a real concern because we had nothing down there. Emerson, I think, got the ball very few and far between, and in that second half, they really did attack our left side because we just offered nothing down there. And I think is it Montez, Cortez or something like that. I think is their right
Castro
side.
Montez,
He had a great game in the second half because again we offered nothing down there. We just we're so disconnected, I thought, in that game. So in terms of going into this leg, and I think you even mentioned it in the last leg that you wanted to see much more pace in that team when we went out in the Gent game. Much the same here. I think we went very pedestrian in some of those selections. So what would you like to see heading into this one to kind of counter some of the threats that we did see from Gent?
I think the biggest thing for me is instead of which is a classic sort of Moyes criticism, I guess, is in these games, instead of looking at the threats that they have going forward, it's looking at the weaknesses they have when they're in their defensive shape. Yep. And I think they're fairly obvious to me that the space they leave in behind the wing backs when they narrow up in the press is huge. And I don't think we really had a plan to exploit that at all in the first leg. So for me, I think the key thing would be having a striker that you can play direct balls into and play off, and then having pace to go in the wide areas off of that. I would be most interested in attacking their left side, their right side from down our left side, because I think there's a real weakness in there behind Castro Montez. In the wide right space for Gent. So, and also I think Antonio, if he played, would be very good, as we've often seen, sort of holding the ball up on that side of the pitch and combining with whoever's the sort of 10 that plays, or most advanced 8 who plays in behind there. So whether it's Fornals, Paquetá, Lanzini, whoever comes and takes the ball off of him in those situations, he's quite good at holding it up and finding a teammate. So, yeah, I think that would be my main focus. I'd like to see Cornet play. Just because I think the game is made for him in many ways, really, when you're playing a direct brand of football against a team that leave themselves exposed in wide areas. So that would be my main thing. I'd also say from the first leg, it seems incredibly obvious to me that we need an additional player in the middle, either to track Hong or just to have the numbers there to at least challenge the second ball when they go direct, because we just don't have that. If you've got 2 8s sitting high and no 6 in behind to cover the space between the midfield and the defense, it makes it very easy for, even if the striker takes a poor touch off the long ball, they've got 8 yards of space to get back onto the ball and then look for Orban or Kuipers or whoever's running through from that point.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, we saw obviously their goal one was incredibly easy. Now it's getting, I think, not having that extra man and people just marking space as opposed to actually marking where possible danger is or reading the play. And Yeah, and I think that was one of the things we really struggled with was just, as you say, that extra man, and it's something that we discussed in the original game. That's something that we need, but let's kind of go into it really. So we know that when we go and play them, they are going to play this back three. We know they're going to have obviously their fullbacks are probably going to be quite high. Let's be honest. They'll have obviously two midfielders that tend to sit. Hong obviously sits in that middle piece, much like how we struggled against the likes of Frankfurt. And obviously they have Auburn and Kuipers up front. Now we know these two are not necessarily the greatest in the air, but what they do very well is they keep your defense honest because they will consistently look to challenge. So then Hong can obviously move into these positions to come and receive the ball. And then obviously he can then look to come into here as these two try to split and obviously create more space. So it's, as you say, we struggled with just having the two. So, you would argue, obviously, I think we probably would both prefer to see maybe a back four. Maybe it's a bit of a risk, but again, it does allow us then to put, say, the likes of Downs in this position. We can then go, I would suspect, because Moyes maybe wants to get the game done early, he may go for Paqueta and Rice. I suspect, and then obviously go for Downs in here. Maybe rest Souček because
is Downs suspended? I don't even know.
Oh no, yeah, you're right. He is suspended.
Picked up a yellow.
It will be Souček then in that case.
I think it might be the first choice.
Yeah, we'll ignore the error on this one. But then I think we got, I can see him maybe going for Fornals and then maybe Cornet on this side because of the Bournemouth game. I think some of the selections are a bit up in the air because I think he would ideally like to have Antonio up top with Bowen, and then maybe he might go for. Part of me feels he will go for the Arsenal team because he maybe wants to get the game done quickly and then go and get them off the pitch, quite early. But
sure,
early subs also not more the thing, are they? So you kind of look at it and go,
no, true.
Maybe he is going to mix it up a little. And as you say, with Downs being suspended, then obviously I think that does probably mean we'll have the standard midfield. And if we do have Fornals here, at least we know Fornals can drift in. You've got the likes of Paqueta can start to move up here. This can kind of go a bit flatter as well. And then we can kind of, slightly have it augmented like so. Because we know they're going to come in. Like this was pretty much their standard positions all game. I think this was pretty much, give or take, the average positions of the Gent team. So there's a lot of room for the likes of, Emerson, Johnson or Soufal. Whoever plays on this right-hand side, again, space over here. If we've got Paqueta and he's moving, again, there's a lot of space that we can actually look to move and attack with. We've just got to be sensible. And as I say, I think, defending those second balls and maybe Souček actually sitting here is a good idea because of what he can bring for us in terms of winning those, those first kind of long direct passes because we do have to invert these guys to press. I think we probably do sacrifice this kind of area a bit because we do have good mobility if we're playing Rice and if we're playing Paqueta. So maybe we sacrifice this area and, again, rely on these guys to do the 1v1. And it just becomes a matter of a bit of a central battle here, maybe going almost man for man, which could be a risk. But we did see against Arsenal that when we went man for man, we were actually a lot better, surprisingly. I think that's obviously what Paqueta also said, is that we all of a sudden seem to have the penny drop that we can press, we can go man for man, we can attack. So maybe we will see a braver approach because once we did that against Arsenal, we started to see a lot more kind of positivity. And even in the last leg against Gent, when Paqueta came on, his ability to press quickly, you did see Gent start to struggle to play through as much as they did. Obviously, they hit us in transition. That's something we've really got to be wary of, is how good they are in transition, because Auburn's quality in that regard, and Kuipers and Hong as a triumvirate are very well organised, considering the short period of time they've had together. So, I do feel, like you say, that extra man in midfield is going to be pivotal in which to kind of get us a stamp. But one thing that I have I kind of saw what they did against Başakşehir here. They actually went for a 4-4-2, surprisingly, in that away leg. So part of me wonders whether they maybe change from this formation, because it has been a 3-5-2-1-2 throughout the whole season for Ghent. So one part of me does worry that if they're worried about the open space at London Stadium, whether they maybe go for that 4-4-2, because it gives them a better spread.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel? Do you think they'll stick with their tried and tested, or do you think they maybe will try a formation that they've used sparingly this season?
I think they may stick as they were, banking on the fact that we'll carry on doing what we did. Possibly if they saw that we'd changed a bit in terms of what we were doing, then maybe they would also change it at that point. But because of how effective they were able to be in the first leg, it seems difficult for me to say that you would throw that out and do something completely different, because actually they will know themselves in the first leg, had they been more accurate in the final third, then they would have won that, and possibly by a 2-goal margin as well, because of the strength of their performance, particularly in the last 20-25 minutes going forward. I don't know, it's difficult to say, and I'm actually not sure. Do you know where Hong played when they went for
I think he
off
played
the left?
on the left-hand side when
Yeah.
they did that last time. So I think they moved up the right wing back into right midfield. Hong switched into left midfield, and then obviously the front two was the front two. So it didn't offer a huge amount of change. I think Piotski,
it's fairly similar, isn't it? It doesn't change all that much, even if your defensive shape is slightly different. You're getting very similar roles out of the same players.
Exactly. So it's a very well drilled team, and that's the thing. You can see them maybe doing it because obviously our pitch is wider, it's also longer. They may just kind of set up with the back three, and then depending on game situations, move into a 4. But it's an interesting thing that I know when I noticed that they had changed it a couple of times this season, and it was in kind of obviously the Başakşehir game away from home. They also did it, I think, against Club Brugge as well, away from home. So they seem to have done something they've used in a couple of big games when they maybe wanted a little bit more security, because, as you say, they do leave gaps, and their defense doesn't necessarily always switched on, in my opinion. I think they will leave you open in the area if you attack with pace, and that's the thing I think that we didn't do enough of in the last game. The intensity in our passing, it was so slow and laboured. It just meant they were able to get in shape. And the moments we did actually inject a little bit, we seemed to cut through. And I think one of the things we need to, again, with Paqueta, I think what it does at least give us is a runner from deep looking to get into the area, which puts another body in. It's something that you can see in a couple of occasions. It had Declan Rice burst forward a bit with a bit more intensity, he would have had 2 fantastic opportunities that we wasted because he was either on the edge of the area or just jogging to the area. And you just kind of, if you want to be that number 8 that you say that you want to be, or what fans say you are, you need to make those, for a lack of a better player, a Lampard-esque type run. You need to
that's one of the biggest themes this season for me from a tactical perspective is that, and even back end of last season, is that we have tried to give him license to be that player. And actually it's for me, when it's come to those moments in the final third where you need him to offer that quality or find himself in the right position, he's not really delivered at all. And the moments where he have largely been long range shots.
And then often he's leaning back as well. It's like he loses that composure and technique that he has so well everywhere else. But in that final third, you can see it doesn't seem natural for him.
No, I don't. I completely agree. It is not natural. He doesn't have the natural instincts to get himself into the right areas. Even when he sort of arrives as, when we've been playing that earlier in the season, playing a sort of 3-4-3 where he becomes pretty heavily burdened creatively. So if he arrives around the edge of the box, his instinct is to slow up and go wide. He doesn't have that kind of feint and then find a player between the lines. I've never really seen him do that.
No, even Carrick, who is not that type of player, you would see him, he would drop a shoulder and just play a little side rule pass straight through. And it's the player that's not necessarily natural in that final third in terms of an overall attacking presence, but knows when to make that pass, knows when to, maybe roll it to the side for a wing. And I think that's the thing, as you say, Declan doesn't quite yet have that, and that has sometimes impeded us. Also, he has been pretty creative. for us this overall season. But it's just those fine margins where he's just not quite at the level I think some of our fans will say he is as an 8. And because you see,
it's also where I slightly worry about him. I mean, if he goes to Arsenal next season and they do want to put him in the Xhaka role, I do worry slightly about how he copes with that, because Xhaka's positioning in the final third is actually really, really good. He understands how to create space for others. I don't see that as a strength of Declan Rice's at all.
I think Rice is. We've said it before. He's a very good 8, but a world-class 6.
Yeah.
And if you play him as an 8, you're going to get a very good 8. But you're not going to get that play, like you say, with Xhaka. Xhaka has that eye. He knows when he can make those passes. He can find those little pockets of space, but also he has a thunderous shot as well.
Yeah.
Declan Rice can have a thunderous shot, but it tends to be a thunderous shot into row Z, which is part of the problem. And I think when you look at Rice, for instance, I do think he's, if you talk about an Arsenal kind of perspective, he is really going in to push Partey either forward or out. I don't see him as in that Xhaka role, because Xhaka's just, he's just a different player, I think, to Rice. And he also did play slightly more offensive when he was in the Bundesliga. So
exactly.
It's far more natural to Xhaka to be that. But obviously we digress a little. But when we look at the game, I think we have to be far better in how we transition. We did a couple of times look very good when we kind of came forward, particularly on that right-hand side. Obviously, we do need to exploit, I guess, the youthfulness of Fofana, who plays there, because positionally, he did get kind of caught out. I don't think they're going to be high-fiving as much this time round.
No.
I definitely think that's not going to happen. But that was a demonstration, though, and that should be a demonstration to players that when you up the intensity, when you improve your speed, their players are not necessarily at that same level in terms of maybe concentration, positions, and
I don't want to simplify the game too much, because it could sound a bit sort of like pundit after a few days off on Sky, but because of the difference in quality that is clearly there, especially when you're looking at the defensive units, to me the game is relatively simple, and it is, if you do go 3 in the midfield and you win the midfield battle and you pick up the second balls and you play a dynamic front 3 that is athletically capable of stretching that back line, the quality we have will mean we score goals. It's for me, it is that simple. And you have a few tactical things to work out. You probably want back 3 coverage in some situations because of the fact that Hong will stay high sometimes or go out to the wing, and then that means Kuipers is out on the wing. If Rice is your 6, Rice can just drop into that left centre-back position, and your left centre-back, if it's Agard, say, for this game, can just step into the middle, and then you've got your sort of 3-2-5 attacking shape, which gives you that little bit extra protection. So, I'm not really worried in that sense about sort of tactically or like the strengths of their individual players. I think they've got some good players, but if you lose the midfield battle, you make them look so much better, and that's what we did in the first game. If you deny them that platform by being effective in the middle of the pitch, I think it's very difficult for them, even if they're going to have moments where they threaten with that front 2 from long balls. If winning the battle in the middle, and it's difficult for them to find anyone to go back into in those situations, even though it's a 2v2 and you're worried about it sometimes, I'm not hugely concerned in terms of the amount of control we'd have of the game, and the fact that I think we could get ahead in the first half an hour, then that makes it really difficult for them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's probably one of those games that I think many have been critical of Souček, rightly so, recently. And the Arsenal game, he was largely ineffective. He made a couple of good moments, a couple of good challenges, good clearances from set pieces, but largely was just a figure having a lovely stroll for most of the game. But I could maybe accept him doing that again, if it's terms of you just follow Hong. That's your role. You just follow Hong. We will use Paqueta and Rice because they have such great mobility, ability to press, and just tell them that you're going to have to do a lot of work. He is just basically going to stop Hong, because if he can get in and around Hong, that also means those second balls, those third balls, when they're trying to kind of play that more direct play, is going to kind of be stifled. Kind of interesting what we do up front, because I think Cornet is an option we should be looking at. 100%.
Yes, definitely.
Again, I'm just wondering whether he will go for Antonio, just because I think he might want to get the game done in the first half. I think if we go 2-0 up by half time, I think the game is probably over. I know that sounds a bit overconfident and arrogant, but I
don't think you're wrong.
Fine. I think we have to have that idea of if we get 1 or 2 up, then probably time for change.
Well, the question you have to ask if you got into a 2-0 lead is where do Gent have to go from there tactically? And if they have to open up even more than they already do, the gaps going the other way for us to be effective on the counter become very easy for us to exploit with the quality of player we have. So it's very difficult for Gent if they I think even if they're 1-0 down, it becomes an incredibly difficult game for Gent. So I don't think that's a particularly arrogant thing to say just because of the imbalance.
I think we've probably seen a lot of teams come to London Stadium and have actually struggled from Europe because it is such a large pitch. I think we have seen that when we tend to bring teams to our stadium, bar Frankfurt, I probably think most teams have actually struggled when they've come to us. Even Seville, who are a brilliant team, but we made looked very, very ordinary that night. So the pitch could play a huge part for us because as we saw in the first leg, how much they like to condense in the space we're going to have. I'm wondering as well if, it is very unlike Moyes, but whether even it's a shout for maybe even the chance for someone like Mubama to be that front player because he is so athletic and he can press so on. And also we need the likes of Antonio and Ings, maybe utilising Mubama up top with, say, Cornet one side of him for that pace and so on. Maybe that's an option. Even it's a bit of a stretch, but maybe even using Mubama as an inside forward on the right side because he's done it quite a bit for the under-18s, does it kind of slightly for under-21s. Maybe that's an option to get that pace that, as we've seen with Mubama, really good forward press, and then utilise Ings as that poacher and just kind of, again, just have Ings doing the honest donkey work because he does. I give him his due. He will run hard and run about and try to press, but it's been ineffective because I don't think he's necessarily been supported. So I think he's been set up a little to fail for him. And then if we've got Souček doing kind of a freer defensive role, I think maybe that could help us out because we'll put pressure on that front line. We know Mubama in the short stint against Arsenal, when he came on, he kind of put our forwards to shame because he was absolutely knew when to go and he did it with intensity. So I'm just kind of wondering is there maybe a chance or maybe is it time, bearing in mind we're Bournemouth this weekend, to maybe look at, say, Mubama and say, go on and go have a go? Would you be tempted?
Yes, I already am tempted. Have been for a while actually, because I think he's a more useful option than we've maybe given him credit for.
I think he's quite a Moyes striker, if I'm honest. He has that. Is that pressing?
Exactly.
I don't kind of get. I understand why we went for Ings, but I kind of also looked as well. You've got a young lad who plays relatively the same as Antonio, obviously less physical, but he plays. From that perspective, you want someone to press, you want someone to attack in certain ways. Mm-hmm. He's a bit of a fox in the box and he will run channels. It's like that is your archetypal striker, and yet you're giving him no opportunities. It seems a bit of an odd one to me.
I agree. I think partly Moyes' perspective is that he prefers to go with people who are proven, especially I think in the situation that we've been in the league, that he wouldn't want to throw. Say if Antonio got injured, I think there was a concern over Skamaka's fitness. So if you had both strikers out and then it was a relegation battle where Mubama had to be the guy, that would be a really difficult situation for him, potentially very good for his development, but also potentially really bad psychologically if it went wrong and he didn't score and the pressure that you'd get from the fans and all of that stuff. It's a difficult situation. It's not quite as simple as just throw the young guy in, and then once you've bought Ings, you kind of have to play Ings. You can't just leave him out and play Mubama. So it is complicated, but I completely respect what you're saying, and I agree. I think in terms of the mold of striker that Moyes is looking for and needs really to functionalize his approach, Mubama is the closest thing we've got to that outside of Antonio. So it's been a surprise that maybe he hasn't had more opportunities, definitely as a substitute in games to come on and stretch defenses and press aggressively, especially I think when we're winning. He'd be quite a useful player to bring on in those situations. I think he maybe gets a chance to do that in this game from the bench. but it may also be the case that if it depends entirely basically on whether you're looking at it and going kill the game as soon as possible and sub everyone off, or whether you're looking at certain players like Antonio, who only managed 60 minutes against Arsenal, who we're probably really going to need against Bournemouth, and saying that you'd rather not start him and try and get away with it with Ings up top. That is where Mbama's chance will either come or go. If Antonio starts, I think he's maybe got more of a chance of having a second half appearance. If Ings starts, because we're worried about Antonio's fitness, and we don't. I think if Ings started, I don't think it would be as comfortable as maybe if Antonio started. Then I think you'd see Antonio come on in the second half.
Because I think you only got to look at the first leg when Antonio came on. That defense was far more hurried. He didn't necessarily do a huge amount on the ball, but it's that honest running that he did that put them under pressure. And you could see they were less comfortable in possession, even though we weren't great in that last 115 minutes. But it's just that.
Well, again, it's harsh to say this, I know, and it's harsh on our own players and it's harsh on Gent. Antonio wasn't great when he came on, but if you put enough dynamic, athletic players in there who are going to just make the gaps a little bit bigger, the players who have got real quality suddenly look like they're in a completely different stratosphere to the rest of the players on the pitch. So for me, that the game really is, like I said, that simple. It's you throw a few runners in who do things like take Hong out the game, keep the defense honest, and suddenly Paquetá is just like waltzing around having the easiest time of his life in the middle of the pitch. And that's all I think that we need to do. I don't think it's particularly difficult, even though they're a very good team and they caused us lots of problems in the first leg, and they will cause us problems in the second leg as well. I think really there are some very simple elements that you can just do certain things to nullify what they do and use certain players, maybe that it doesn't necessarily respect other qualities that they might have, but use other players to be just effective in stretching the defense and keeping them honest and making sure the gaps are big. And then, your high quality players that are just on a different level to everyone else on the pitch will stand out a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to pretty much end this and to kind of sum it up as a game. But final thing, if you're going to put your neck on the line and then go for a scoreline, what are you going for, Jack?
2-0?
I think that's a pretty... Yeah, I kind of feel a 2-0 is good. I think if we play like we did against Arsenal, I do think we'll blow them out the water. I have a feeling we might go almost full strength and try and get the game won early.
Yeah, that's what I think will happen.
And then empty the bench and rest up for Bournemouth, because let's face it, that Bournemouth game is huge now, especially if we win that Bournemouth game. We can go kind of all out for the... Yeah, and you can probably say if we win that Bournemouth game and obviously win against Gent, then we are safe for the season in the Premier League, and then it is all out for the Europa Conference. But awesome. Jack, thanks for joining us, mate. Everyone, obviously, this has been a bit of a shorter one today. We haven't maybe gone into some of the annotations we normally would, but, work and all of that stuff. But, Jack, thanks for joining us, mate. Really appreciate it. And
thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you on, mate. And guys, thanks for again, like, subscribe, share, all of those things. If I don't do it, Frankie will moan at me. He's recuperating at the moment. So, please do like, subscribe. Follow Jack as well. Follow, as Analytics United.
Analytics United.
Yep. So please do follow Analytics United as well. They put out some great stuff. And so guys, let's go get the win. Let's get on to the next round. Let's beat Bournemouth the weekend, and we can try and be happy hammers for another week.
Yeah, exactly. Come on your irons.
Cheers. Come on your iron. Bye now.